while integrating development for your current leaders. Now, to illustrate the power of a proactive approach, I'm going to walk through a project template that's suitable for any size project. I encourage you to think about using this in your own organization. Not to be confused with a project plan or project management tool. This is a project leadership tool. You don't hear a lot about project leadership. We've operationalized in many industries project management. May have heard of Agile. We've done a lot to operationalize the project management, but without project leadership, without strong project leadership, your projects are still destined to have problems and often come up short. So this template I'm going to go through in a few minutes is a project leadership tool. Projects should have a project leader, and it's usually somebody on the senior leadership team, if not the owner or CEO themselves, but usually somebody who reports to them. They become the sponsor of that project. It's coming out of their budget, for example. They're the final voice. The project manager is responsible for running the day-to-day project and delivering within budget, on time, and with the right scope, and of course, high quality. The project leader is the one who's going to sign off on scope and budget changes if those do arise, and ensuring that the quality goalposts don't move. That's a very easy thing to happen as projects get closer and closer to the deadline or closer to budget. People start cutting things off, and a lot of times there's quality because it's not as easily quantifiable as some of the other factors in a project. So this position is critical, the project leader. Otherwise, you can find projects morphing into something that's more incremental and less transformational than intended. This gets into why companies are constantly reinventing, and they're doing it over and over and over, and they're not really making the progress that they wanted to. And it's often because they're using an operations approach to leading their projects. So the template is best completed as part of a facilitated conversation, ideally across stakeholders, and should include your leadership team. This brings everyone on board, and as I mentioned, it starts the change management process. But by having stakeholders involved, you're getting a common language, you're getting the input in advance. And what's interesting, even on million-dollar projects, I have found that this project template, it endures. Even at the end of the project, you can pull it out and you're still following along with it. Now, of course, what we expect people to do, the leaders and the managers on the project, we expect them to use this document. And if it has to change, it's got to come back to the leadership team or the stakeholder team. But by having it in documentation at the very beginning, you avoid, remember the telephone game, right? Where you're telling the next person something, and they tell the next person, they tell the next person. And by the time it comes around in the circle, it's completely different. You avoid that problem by having this document, and it's in writing, and you've done it before you've done any work. And that's what makes it easy for it to endure. That's what makes it easy for people to stick with it and follow it. And as I said, it gets the buy-in because you've had the different stakeholders involved in the design of it. Now, if you don't have the leadership team, or for some reason you can't bring the leadership team in, you can use a proxy, have a proxy like a coach or a consultant. You can use your attorney or even an accountant. So any stakeholder who's interested in the success of your organization can be a sounding board. You can use a peer, somebody from another company. You guys can help each other out. You might be involved in a mastermind. There's different ways that you can get through this facilitation. Ideally, I would say the leadership team and stakeholders is the first choice, and then you can go from there. And in a pinch, you can ask AI for things to consider and then select from that list. I wouldn't use the answers from AI, but you can use AI to give you ideas, and that way it kind of helps you think through different elements that you may be including. You'll see it makes more sense once I get into it. Now, if you want to work through this template with me on a project that you're considering, use the link in the description on this post. You can schedule a complimentary fit call. At 45 minutes, we'll have a conversation about what you're trying to accomplish. Make sure there's adequate alignment, and if so, on a limited basis, we can take up to 2 hours on the project design. And I'll do that as complimentary because you're watching this video. And then from there, you will be able to keep the project design. We will work through it in a facilitated way, and then you will own that project design once you walk away. And then if you want to work further, we can talk about that. But that initial step would be complimentary. So what we'll do now is we'll take a look at this project template. It's a leadership tool. It's not a project management tool. And you can use this for $1 million project. You can use it for a $10,000 project. And because what it is, it's the art part of it. It's getting your ideas and thoughts down on paper and doing it in a way before the stress comes in. Once you have dollars on the line and timelines, et cetera, it's very easy to get caught up into stress responses. So the first thing, obviously, is the project name. So we're just going to put the project name. That's simple, right? Straightforward. And then you're going to have the objective. Again, it's straightforward. I don't want to get into vernacular and how you do it, but you have the vision, then you have your goals, and then you have your objectives. I would think about it like that. And then you might have your tactics to reach those objectives. That's one way to think about it. And then this one is interesting here, doing what, for whom, and why. And I like to suggest that when you get to the for whom part, you resist thinking about the end user. You want to be thinking about the sponsor. Get your team used to thinking about the sponsor, who's paying for it. Because as you scale your organization, you as the owner or CEO are here, and you have your leadership team. The people who are using this document are going to be a few levels below potentially, and they need to be thinking about who's the sponsor. That doing it for whom is the person who's writing the check. Now, initially, you can put both. You can put, for the vision of the organization and the group that you're serving. You can do that in the beginning, but I do want to encourage you to think about the whom as the sponsor. This is important. So in the scope, we're going to put the things to avoid scope creep, right? And then this one down here, you notice that the top one is larger than the bottom one. So on the bottom one, I might have like eight items. Like in this one, I may have 8 entries. And then in the lower one, typically I end up with about 3 entries. The reason is because we want to call out the things that are in scope. And you can use this, by the way, when there's sub-projects. You can use this at the master project level, and then you can use it at the sub-project levels. But the reason I put in the 3, it's the obvious ones. You're calling out that you're going to change the CRM, but one of the things that are out of scope is coming up with a new platform. You want to stick with the same platform, but you're going to use different modules in that platform is what I wanted to get to. So there's, like if you're changing the website for the organization, you might say changing to a portal is out of scope. We're not going to move to a portal. We're going to stay here. Or changing to an enterprise solution is out of scope. We're going to stay with this current solution for now. Whatever it is, just call out the ones, and it keeps people, it frames people and gets them focused on where you're focusing on. Guiding principles are very, very important. This is where you're going to get your freedom of action, right? Because it enables you to delegate not just tasks, but you can then delegate the entire responsibility. Delegate the responsibility. The leader's accountable, but this person would be responsible for doing the day-to-day work. And now they have freedom of action because they can look at the guiding principles. And a lot of the ones that I often use, under promise and over deliver. I use effectiveness first, then efficiency. I'll say things like that. And they tend to repeat, but as the leader, you'll want to have those articulated and know what they are. And they do change. You might, again, I'll try to have 6 to 8 of them. Deliverables, these are actually potentially sub-projects. And these are, yes or no, either it was delivered or not. And it helps start to frame things. That helps you organize the work. And again, if you have your leadership team involved at the very beginning, this conversation gets easier, right? Because you're talking about deliverables, and people already know who's going to be using that deliverable and who's going to own the deliverable. Then the assumptions is this is going to be the things that you're not sure about. These are going to need to be checked on, right? They need validation. You may want to do some testing. It may require some skunkworks testing, or you may want to do a short-term fix, and that might be up here as a deliverable. A short-term fix might be something that I want to do, because if you're under stress, if the organization is under stress already, you're in a crisis mode, there might be something you have to do right away, short-term fix, and then that gives you the breathing room to spend more time with it. Then what here, I like to do here, so remember up here we had doing what, for whom, and why. And then here we're going to restate it. And the reason for that is now that we've thought through it, we're going to come up with the soundbite. It's not quite an elevator speech, but it's the one sentence description that everybody can rally around. You know what it's going to be. You know where everybody knows what they're talking about when they say it. It's going to be descriptive enough. It's going to resonate with people. There'll be ownership around this thing, and that becomes the new name. And I'll tell you where that comes into play. This is used in the design work. Then we have what are the risks and what are you going to do to mitigate it? Because if you think about this being a facilitated conversation, risks will come up. You might do some brainstorming. You want to capture the risks, and you may not do it all in that facilitated conversation, but you get the risks down here, and then what are the possible mitigations? Same thing with resources. What are the resources we're going to use? You know, we might be able to use this software code from here. We might be able to use the tooling from over there. We might be able to use the campaign from earlier, the same customers on the campaign, the list or whatever. So it's not just the resource, it's how you're planning to use them. And then these would be your sub projects. So I would say the deliverables are the bigger buckets, and then the sub projects are the other things that have to be taken along. So you may have to do some training. You may have to, in the case of the CRM, we may need to do some research. We may need to get some different data collected to be able to do that. That becomes a sub project in order to deliver something. Depending on the size, you know, some of those sub projects will have full project teams with them. As the projects get bigger, you can see how this gets layered and layered and layered. Hopefully also you can see that trying to run a project from an operational standpoint or like in operations, it's a non-starter because you're not going to be thinking about these things. You're not going to be dealing with dependencies. And then here's the follow-up item. So there's always going to be something that you didn't think about. What else do we need to do? That's going to go here in the follow-up items, and you'll assign somebody to it as well so that work gets done. So a couple of